Tonight, the Asylum Radio Hour proudly presents Evil Demon Robot Bitch. Based on the novel by Matt Flanagan, new episodes will drop right here every week through Halloween. Grab your copy of the book today at asylumbookstore.com. And now, the story begins. With Aunt Jenna growing more distant each day, Casey took refuge in the castle's grand library, a terrific 2-story room with dark oak shelves and a beautiful desk the size and weight of a train car. Wheeled ladders with stained wooden steps and bronze hinges clung to the shelving, and Casey would glide across the forest green floors, exploring every shelf like a sailor charting unknown seas. The spiral staircase made of black iron took up the center of the room and led to a spectacular second story of selections, with massive dusty volumes by William Shakespeare and Edgar Allan Poe, along with well-loved storybooks to keep her company on rainy days, and dozens of textbooks filled with diagrams and formulas she didn't understand. One stormy afternoon, Casey discovered a small stash of leather-bound journals. The covers were cracked and stained, with pages warped by time. These weren't novels or textbooks. They were diaries. The personal, raw, handwritten thoughts left behind by the castle's former occupants. Casey devoured them. Each volume revealed more of the mansion's strange past, its long line of brilliant, troubled inventors, writers, doctors, and composers, many of whom seemed to grow more and more obsessed with their work, eventually locking themselves away before vanishing for good. Then, in one book more brittle than the rest, Casey came upon a passage that sent shivers down her spine. The date was smudged, and parts of the entry were nearly illegible. Casey squinted and slowly worked her way through the antique handwriting. Here in the stillness, I can finally begin. Beneath stone and silence, it is mine alone. Free from prying eyes and sideways glances, and infuriating interruptions from fools who will never grasp what I am capable of. And on the cusp of. Let them pity. Let them doubt and fear. Let them. They'll see soon enough. The handwriting faded into nothing for several lines, but at the bottom of the page, one final section stood out in bold, clear script. With construction of the second laboratory complete, I can finally begin. Let them call it madness. They always do. Just before the truth arrives. They always do. I can finally begin. The path winds down inside the shelf that holds no books. Casey read the page over and over. Beneath stone and silence. Thump, thump, thump. Excitement bloomed in Casey's chest, but she also felt the soft pangs of hurt. What was Aunt Jenna keeping from her? Casey looked down at the journal entry again. The shelf that holds no books. she read under her breath. Her eyes darted across the upper floor. Every shelf was full, if not overflowing. She dashed down the spiral staircase to the main level and scanned the room quickly. Books. Everywhere. Every shelf sagging under their weight. Thump. 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 The noises had come from below and led to the entrance of the workroom. And her aunt had appeared at the perfect time, disheveled and breathless. Now, Casey had no doubt. Jenna was hiding something below the castle, and the entrance was inside the lab. The next day was a stormy one, with rain thrashing against the windows like angry fists, and whistling winds snaking through the halls after sneaking in through gaps in the vintage walls and windows. A fire crackled low in the kitchen, where Casey sat at the long wooden table, slowly stirring her tomato soup. She hadn't touched a bite. Across from her, Aunt Jenna was hunched over a grease-stained notebook, her fingers still shiny from where they had clutched her grilled cheese. She didn't notice Casey watching. The only sound other than the sputtering fire was the rhythmic scratch of Jenna's pencil. Casey wanted to ask her about the second lab beneath the house, but what if she became angry? What if that was the final straw before her aunt sent her packing? A chime came from the speakers hidden in the walls, and Jenna dropped her notebook to the tabletop. "Oh, shoot," she blurted. "I've got to hop on a call with the university." She tapped something into her smartwatch and stood quickly. "You okay finishing lunch on your own?" "What's the difference?" Casey wanted to cry. "You've been staring at your notebook this whole time." But instead, she simply said, "Sure." Jenna picked up her notes and hurried for the study at the front of the house. As soon as she was gone, Casey rose from her seat. The workroom was colder than usual, and Casey rubbed her arms for warmth as she tiptoed along carefully, scanning every corner as her pulse crashed against her eardrums. "The shelf that holds no books," she whispered. It couldn't be any of the shelves along the walls, so she shifted her attention to the less obvious spots in the room. At the back, there were several large storage cabinets tucked side by side against the wall. Most of them were dented and a bit rusty, but one of them was taller than the others and made of antique wood. Casey took off in a run and threw the doors open, exhaling with disappointment as her gaze landed on a handful of shelves holding boxes. But then she looked closer. It wasn't what was on the shelves that gave it away. It was what wasn't. Not a speck of dust, no stains, no cobwebs, and not a single book. Unlike every other shelf in the castle, these weren't bending under the weight of what they held, because the boxes were empty. Casey reached out and pressed her hands against the back of the cabinet. With a soft click, the panel creaked inward, taking the shelves with it, before finally revealing a narrow spiral staircase descending into darkness. Casey grabbed a flashlight from the corner of the lab, a cheap plastic cylinder with barely enough power to make her feel brave. She stood at the top of the spiral stairs, then started down slowly, the ancient metal steps creaking beneath her bare feet. darkness wrapped around her like a living thing. The thin beam from her flashlight wavered as she descended, illuminating nothing more than the dust suspended in the chilly air. At the bottom, Casey landed on solid stone. In front of her was a wooden door. As she considered turning back, a rat scurried across her foot. With a muffled shriek, she stumbled backwards, flailing for something to grab and latching onto a rung of the staircase. It pulled like a lever, and the floor started to rumble. With a deep, grinding sound, the stone wall across from the wooden door began to shift. Dust spilled from the seams as a section of rock creaked inward, revealing a false door leading to another hidden passage. Casey stepped forward to aim the flashlight into the tunnel, but the beam didn't reach anything but dirt. The false wall groaned as if preparing to close again. She kicked off her slippers and wedged them into the gap, hoping with all her might that she wouldn't meet another rodent, or anything else for that matter. The air chilled almost immediately as Casey entered the tunnel. There was no floor but packed dirt, no sound but the distant drip of unseen water and the padding of her steps. Time began to feel strange. As Casey kept walking, it began to feel like she wasn't moving forward at all. She slowed, then finally stopped. She turned around, shining the light in the direction she'd come from. Then she turned around again, before pausing and looking back over her shoulder. Nothing was any different in either direction. Bracing herself, Casey shut off the light for a moment and allowed her vision to adjust in the dark. Squinting in each direction, she willed herself to see the doorway that she'd come from. But she didn't see anything at all. She turned the flashlight on again and sat down against the wall. She planned to head back after catching her breath. To head back. She pointed the light down the tunnel, then did the same in the other direction. Her stomach landed in the dirt as she realized that she'd lost track of which way she was walking. "Brilliant," Casey whispered. She licked her finger and held it in the air, hoping for even the faintest breeze to indicate the way to go. But the air was dead. Then Casey heard something. It sounded distant, but it was there. Something else was shuffling through the tunnel, in her direction. She froze. Then she heard another sound, and it was closer. Casey bolted. She ran blindly, her light bouncing wildly over the stone. The tunnel didn't end. It curved and dropped slightly, then curved again. She kept running, until finally she saw it. A rectangle of light. It had to be the door. Casey's breath caught as she realized it wasn't the way she'd come from, but it was good enough. She pushed against the wall and it gave way, spitting her out through the door of a fake refrigerator. She'd stumbled straight into the 1960s, a basement decorated with thick shag carpet, wood paneling, and cobwebs. The walls were littered with old beer signs, unlit neon logos for O'Fallon's and Spudweiser potato beer that were turned off for the last time long ago. A pool table sat below a broken chandelier, heavy ivory balls still in the triangle, like someone had walked away only moments ago. A dusty jukebox loomed in the corner, dark and silent. Casey spotted a staircase on the far wall and followed it up to a lime green kitchen. The counter was cluttered with ceramic fruit, and patterned dish towels hung limply from the handles of avocado cabinets. A rotary phone clung to the wall like a relic, next to a calendar so faded that she couldn't read the year. Casey stepped toward the living room, and a chill snatched at her spine as something moved behind her. "You shouldn't be here." Casey spun around. Jenna stood at the top of the basement stairs, not angry, not even surprised. Casey clutched the flashlight more tightly. "What is this place?" Jenna hesitated. "Come back to the house with me," she said. "We can talk about it there. How many secret passages does your castle even have?" "This was my home when I was a child. Before we moved into the castle, my parents and I lived here. The tunnel was an old secret escape route for emergencies, war, that sort of thing. Later, it was used to smuggle alcohol during Prohibition, when this cottage doubled as a speakeasy." Casey pictured the dusty jukebox and beer signs and imagined the ghosts of parties long gone. "My parents believed the castle would have everything we could ever want, so we didn't take much with us when we moved." "You just left everything here?" Casey asked. "For all this time?" "I thought about turning it into a guest house," Jenna explained, "but I don't host guests. And with all those empty rooms at the castle, well, I could never bring myself to change anything." Casey looked at the rotary phone hanging on the wall. She approached it curiously. "I've only seen one of these in old movies." "Is that so?" Jenna crossed the room and lifted the receiver. A moment later, a soft, crackling dial tone buzzed through the air. "It still works?" Casey asked in disbelief. "Haven't used it in years," Jenna said, brushing her fingers over a dusty typewriter nearby. "But it's good to know it's here, should the need arise." "What do you mean?" Casey asked cautiously. "Old phones like this still work even if the power goes out. No batteries, no chargers, just a dependable, direct line." Casey frowned. "Why would the castle lose power?" Jenna chuckled softly, but her eyes were serious. "Not the castle, sweetheart. The world." She didn't elaborate. Instead, she tapped the face of her smartwatch, illuminating the dim room with a cold white light. "Come on," she said gently. "We should head back before your flashlight dies." Jenna turned toward the stairs, but Casey didn't follow. "You could have told me about this," she said, raising her voice. "We used to spend all day together. Now I barely see you. What else are you keeping from me?" "Casey," Jenna stopped in her tracks. "I wasn't trying to hide anything. It's complicated." "You lied to me!" Casey snapped. "I didn't lie. You lied by omission," Casey cried. "But I guess I'm used to it. Everybody lies to me. Whatever you have to say to keep me distracted." "Casey, please. I'm tired of it!" Casey's voice cracked, rising into a full-volume shout. The adrenaline from the tunnel discovery was busting loose, carrying everything else with it. "Everybody lies to me. Everyone who says I can stay with them forever. Miss Clara when she promises the next place will be the one. And my mom and dad..." Her voice caught in her throat. "They told me they'd never leave me. And they did. They left me and took my brother and never came back." The final words tumbled out in a sob and Casey's legs buckled beneath her as she collapsed to the floor. Jenna rushed forward and knelt beside her, wrapping her arms around her niece. She held Casey close, hushing her gently and rocking her like a baby. "I've got you," Jenna whispered. "I've got you. I'm not going anywhere." They stayed like that for a long time, until Casey's tears softened and her breathing returned to normal. Then Jenna stood and reached out for her niece, and together they made their way back home, walking slowly, hand in hand. Jenna and Casey stayed in bed for the whole rest of the day, snuggled up under the fairy lights while their favorite music played. They had pizza and ice cream delivered via robot, while a marathon of movies played directly from the walls. "I'm sorry," Casey said eventually. "You don't have to be sorry," Jenna replied. "But I am." Casey looked at her aunt with wet eyes that had seemingly grown 3 sizes. "Please don't send me back," she said, her voice breaking. "I promise I'll never, ever do anything like that again." Jenna used the blanket to gently dab away the tears rolling down Casey's cheeks. "Sweetheart," she said, "I will never send you away. The thought hasn't even crossed my mind." She picked up Casey's stuffed fox and put on a high, raspy voice, animating the toy as she said, "You're stuck with us forever." Before they fell asleep, Casey showed Jenna the journal that she had found and the entry that led her to the hidden staircase. And finally, Jenna promised to show Casey the basement lab the next day. As they ate breakfast, Jenna gingerly brought up the subject. "The reason I hadn't mentioned it to you," she said, "is because I didn't want to get your hopes up." "What do you mean?" Jenna stood, came around the table, and knelt by Casey's chair. "Your smile brings more light to these halls than they've ever seen. You've lost so much, and yet you still shine." "But," Casey blinked. "But," Jenna continued, "a crazy old robot lady shouldn't be your only friend. You need someone your age to talk to, who can understand you." "I don't know how to make friends," Casey murmured. "You simply need to work on your confidence," added Jenna, "and hopefully having someone around that's more like you will help you get started. The reason I didn't tell you about the second lab is because I've been working on something for you. Or rather, someone." Casey was speechless. "A companion built especially for you, built to grow with you, a perfect match in every way." "Like a robot?" Casey asked, barely above a whisper. Jenna nodded. "And so much more. This is not a machine programmed to deliver breakfast. This is a true friend who can laugh with you, who will always be there." "You would do that for me?" Casey asked. "I would do anything for you," Jenna promised. "And I already have." In a blur, the pair were headed down the hidden staircase together, where Jenna revealed a second workroom behind the wooden door. It was much smaller than the main one, but equally bursting with mechanical mess. At the back of the room was an area separated by a curtain. "She was going to be a surprise," Jenna explained as they entered the room. "And she's not totally finished yet, but a sneak peek won't hurt anybody, right?" With a wink, Jenna disappeared behind the curtain, grunting as she revealed a heavy sarcophagus of sorts on oversized casters. It was roughly 8 feet long, clad in overlapping sheets of dull metallic plating, with stray wires snaking out from the seams. Faint pulses of light flickered from the exposed neural ports, reminiscent of a hospital monitor. Something inside was alive. Casey stepped back instinctively. "What is that?" Jenna didn't answer right away. She steadied the pod, flicked a few toggles on a nearby panel, and with a sharp hiss of releasing pressure, the shell began to split down the middle. Creaking on hydraulic arms, the halves parted slowly to reveal a figure inside. It was a slender, lanky android with a childlike face. She lay motionless in the center of the pod, almost perfectly human-looking, save for the faint lines along the jaw and temples where the synthetic plating met the framework beneath. Decorative freckles sat below the electric eyeballs, and long blonde hair flowed down its back, perfectly complementing Casey's darker curls. Even their frames were similar, almost like they could be sisters. Around the figure was a ring of cables, ports, and metal clamps forming a central hub, where charging lines fed into her spine and a cooling system exhaled soft plumes of vapor. "This is her home base," Jenna said, holding her arms up like the lady on Wheel of Fortune. "Her processing core, cooling, memory expansion, and backup drives. A hub where she downloads updates and runs diagnostics. It's like her nest." "It's huge," Casey muttered. "The primary frame detaches for optimum portability in case of emergency," Jenna revealed smugly. "But what do you think?" she asked. "Of her?" Casey couldn't stop herself from jumping up and down. "She's perfect! I love it! I love it! I love it!" "Her," Jenna corrected. "You love her. And she needs a name so I can stop calling her Model 1. Casey didn't hesitate. "Megyn," she announced. "I want to call her Megyn." The color faded from Jenna's face. Her grip loosened on the android, which toppled to the floor with a clatter. "Oh no!" Casey gasped, rushing forward. "Stop!" Casey froze. Her aunt had never raised her voice before. "She has to do it herself," Jenna clarified. "If she doesn't try, she'll never learn." They watched together as Megyn's limbs twitched and flexed with adjustments. Slowly, with awkward grace, the robot pushed itself upright, swaying like a newborn calf before standing tall. "She's adaptive," Jenna said. "She'll learn and grow every day, just like you and me." She crouched and placed her hands gently on her niece's shoulders. "I hope you really love her." Casey threw her arms around her aunt, clinging tightly. "I do! I really do! And I love you, Aunt Jenna." "I love you too, sweetheart," Jenna promised. "Now, shall we find something for lunch?" Casey paused. "But, Auntie, are you sure the name I chose is okay?" Jenna's face was unreadable. Then she took a deep breath, and her smile returned. "Model Enhanced Generative Youth Nexus," she said. "Megyn is perfect." Casey was curled up in the greenhouse with a paperback resting on her knees. The air smelled like mint and damp clay, and the golden sun filled the room with soft peach light. The door creaked open behind her. She glanced up and froze. Jenna stood excitedly in the doorway, her hands clasped tightly in front of her lab coat. And standing beside her, perfectly still, was Megyn. "Casey," Jenna said, eyes twinkling. "There's someone I'd like you to meet."